You can play a lot of games on Steam, but most of them cost money. Money you might not have. And while I normally have billions of dollars to spend on PC games, I wanted to dive into the deep well of free games that you can find in the Steam store. All through the month of January, I played a free game on Steam each day, recorded my thoughts, and compiled them all into this little video. I wanted to put the spotlight on games that, however much they cost to make, are being offered to the consumer for no charge, even if they're a quality product. And on that journey, I uncovered some excellent hidden gems, and also dug a rabbit hole into some of the weirdest, most unique, and occasionally worst games I've played on Steam. So let's talk about them. Just to be clear, I only played games that are 100% free to own and play from start to finish. No demos, prologues, first chapters, etc. I also want to avoid the big-name multiplayer games like Warframe, Counter-Strike 2, and Path of Exile, and even the very popular single-player ones like Helltaker and Doki Doki Literature Club, not because they aren't good, but everybody knows about those already. And if any of these games pique your interest, I've included links in the description so you can check them out for yourself. So let's get started. I wanted to start with something light and breezy, and I picked Resonance of the Ocean, a puzzle adventure game by Japanese developer Heaviside Creations, made for the Game Jam event Unity 1 Week, where it evidently took first place for art and sound, and 4th overall. Very cool. And that first prize makes sense because this game is all about sound, as you play as a child on the shoreline who hears mysterious noises reverberating across the ocean, and your task is to play those noises back from an old tower using objects you find around the beach. Very basic, and in practice, it is just item collection, but this was made in 1 week for a game jam, so a simple concept executed simply, but well, is all you can ask for. What immediately caught my attention was the art style, a hand-drawn coastal aesthetic with minimal coloring and shading. Reminded me specifically of Japanese woodblock prints, which I'm sure was an inspiration. It's like something out of a postcard, very serene and beautiful, like the sounds that echo across the sea. It uses audio very well, as you have to note how an instrument will sound as a reverberation compared to how it does when played right next to you. You might need a good ear to pick up on that though. And there's a few tidbits of story and lore that hint at something greater, although nothing so grand that you can really piece anything together. Given a longer development time, I feel they definitely could have tapped into the themes of communication across great distances and made a full game based around sounds and notes, but for the brief adventure we have in Resonance of the Ocean, I enjoyed what the team created. It's short and very easy to get all the achievements, so if that sounds pretty good to you, I recommend playing through this one. For something more action-heavy, I next picked up Vestige, an action-adventure platformer created by Chemical Games, a studio formed by a team of 4 graduates at La Salle College in Montreal, where it won first prize in 2022 as determined by the school's jury. In it, you play as a nameless explorer, plundering the depths of a cavern filled with crystals and lava, with a sword in hand and some solid jumping skills to get you out safely. I was kind of feeling an itch for a platformer this day, and this certainly isn't anything spectacular. It is a student project after all, but the level design is solid, the controls and physics feel pretty tight, and it's got about an hour's worth of content. So I'd say mission accomplished on all fronts. Mid-air dashing and wall jumping are your main methods of transportation, with basic combat thrown in and occasional encounters and bosses to dispatch. Very 6th-gen action platformer like a Zelda or Prince of Persia, but with Mario-style acrobatics. I was actually surprised at how much stuff there was to do, especially for a game made in 4 months. I mean, there are only 3 areas, not counting the final boss arena, but all of them have branching paths and secrets to find. I'm sure I missed something in my brief time here, even though I surveyed each room carefully to look for other exits. That's pretty cool, although while the platforming and stage design is well done, the combat does weigh it down a bit. It's just too straightforward and stiff for me, in the same way that combat in a lot of 6th-gen and 7th-gen games are. Vestige just works better as a platformer than a fighter, but hey, it shows plenty of promise for these developers, and that's all you can ask for. Time Thief is a game by Brazilian designer Matheus Mortati, made in the Pico 8 game engine, the same one used for the original Celeste. I've enjoyed a few Pico 8 games in the past, and this looked interesting with its primarily black and white aesthetic and its theme of playing against the clock. Quite literally, as your village is the only safe haven from the flow of time, but your quest is to find the 3 keys out in the wild, and once you leave, the 60-second timer starts counting down to your demise, so you gotta sap more time by killing enemies. Despite that pressure placed on you, it actually isn't that difficult because enemies are plentiful and constantly respawn. Even when taking some time to explore most of the map, I could still reliably get that timer to the maximum 99 seconds and keep it hovering there. But it's an interesting dichotomy. You potentially waste time by going after enemies, yet at some point you have to or you'll die. It would make this game interesting to speedrun. My playthrough took about 20 minutes, but that could easily be cut down with a good route. And whatever was lost in its relative lack of challenge, Time Thief makes up for in just being charming and unique. The restrictions of the Pico 8 engine really do breed creativity, and you can absolutely feel that here. As much as this is a fairly rudimentary top-down adventure game, the reduced color palette and vague map system force you to pay attention to what's around you to find your way. It's hard to get lost considering how small the world is, but it feels much larger thanks to the ever-ticking clock. Definitely a highlight so far, and the first of these games that I wish was expanded into a full multi-hour experience, although this still is, and you know where this was headed, a good time either way. Well, I wanted something weirder for day 4, and I think I found it. Toilet Zone, a game made by Wolfenrod for the MitzJam 1, hosted by YouTuber Mizziziz, where it placed in the top 50 out of 682 entries. In it, you're a duck who gets stuck in their toilet and transported to a new zone. A toilet zone, if you will. You use a flow of water to blast yourself across this place, avoiding deadly traps and walls. If you've played any 2D flight games, you've played this, very Newgrounds-esque, but with nice pixel graphics. You can steer and activate thrusters, but you've got to be careful not to send your spaceship into something dangerous. I'm sorry, your toilet ship. Potty humor aside, this is the kind of game you're grateful only lasts for a couple of minutes because it isn't very deep or even that fun. Not that it's bad, it's just that of the games I've played so far, this has the most annoying controls by design. It's supposed to be floaty, but I wish there was a lower velocity cap because I found it a bit too easy to go crazy with your crapper. It all works, I'm not trying to be down on this one, and it's probably more on me being impatient than anything. That's all I can say about this though. It's quite literally a one-button game, and unlike its namesake, it ain't full of shit. Unfortunately, it's not full of much else to talk about, so moving on. Next up we have Grimhook, a game originally created for a game jam by developer Unlimited Fries, and now expanded into a fuller release that took about 9 months to make. This Lovecraftian adventure sees you play as a shipwrecked sailor named Dart, traversing the underground ruins of his home with the aid of the talking gem Kaya Talia, who gives you various momentum power-ups so you can, dart across surfaces with ease. Almost like a bouncier Prince of Persia that adds the gel-based movement from Portal 2. What I love most about Grimhook is how much freedom the developers gave you to get across each room. There are several paths to take, so you have a few options for each set piece, whether you want to take it slow or try to incorporate multiple jumps into one long string. I like that accommodation. It's not so challenging that you can't learn the fundamentals, but the option is there for those who want to go faster. You get a surprising amount of tools at your disposal, from the grappling hook to latch onto things, to powerful mid-air dashes and wall running, all of which feels fluid and is very natural to pull off in sequence. About the only weak aspect is the combat, which certainly isn't terrible and incorporates the momentum and flying gameplay fairly well, but could definitely be fine-tuned with better controls and enemy variety. That's my only gripe though, as the rest of Grimhook was delightful, even for just a half-hour run like mine. This felt the most like a ready-to-ship-for-money game that I've played so far, including full voice acting and in-engine cutscenes, with its length the only thing holding it back. From what I gather, this wasn't meant to be a demo at launch, but I hear that the developers are now working to expand this into a complete commercial game, and I will be there day one when that launches because this was an absolute treat. For day 6, I wanted to try out a game that had mixed reviews on Steam, and I chose My Friend Aki, currently sitting at 55% positive reviews, made by the studio Duck Duck Juice. Great studio name, but is the game great? Well, it's one of those horror exploration games where you're trespassing in an abandoned mall trying to find your friend Aki, who happens to be a pseudo-Tamagotchi, and who also has abilities that affect the real world. Or one ability, anyway. Cool concept and all, but it isn't executed super well. It has good ideas behind it, but each one has some kind of practical flaw getting in the way. For instance, the dynamic lighting system. You can choose which areas to light up by toggling switches at breaker boxes, but as you might have noticed, this game is incredibly dark, and to diffuse neon lighting, however realistic it may be, means getting lost is inevitable. Picking up work lights to help you get around only barely helps you see things, and trying to put them down is annoying thanks to the physics engine, especially if there's a prop in the way. Having to use makeshift tools in the environment to interact with things is neat, but every solution seems either too obvious or too abstract, even with all this floating hint text. This feels very much like a tech demo, and if that's the case, I really hope Duck Duck Juice can iron out all the kinks, because this shows promise. For all my complaining, my friend Aki could serve as the basis to a great indie horror title, just not in its current state. In Line Out of Time is another student project created by a team of 12 at DigiPen Institute of Technology under the name Partial Dynamics, which is also the name of a package delivery company in the game that you're an employee of, and in order to get those parcels to their rightful owner, you strap on your rollerblades and zoom across the futuristic city. Yeah, you can tell exactly what inspired this one, right down to the thumping electronic soundtrack and general vibe. And the less than perfect controls, because in addition to a very floaty jump, it's sometimes pretty hard to get from area to area in this game. Grinding on rails feels like a gamble on whether or not you'll actually attach to it, and jumping off of walls feels especially finicky. The sense of speed is great, but because of how awkward interacting with the level geometry is, it's easy to lose that speed or get sent into a corridor you didn't want to go down. Try not to be too rough, as again, this was made by students, and I see the makings for something really fun here. I look at these levels and I can see how with tighter gameplay, optimizing your run through each stage would be a blast. But as far as this video goes, I can really only talk about what was published on Steam, and what was released is rough around the edges. And I mean, there are other options out there for a 2D Jet Set Radio-like game, although maybe not one released for free. In Line Out of Time has the makings of a solid sports action game, but without a full development cycle to nail down all the issues, the end result is a bit too jank for me. There are several Steam games based around the story of Sisyphus, and for Day 8, I decided to play Sisyphus by Squiggly Starfruit Studios. Not the best name, I know, but it at least has all caps for emphasis. Anyway, you play as, well, guess who, tied to that boulder and forced to escape through a series of platforming levels. While the boulder is a constant ball and chain, you can fling it in any direction and pause it in the air, but you gotta avoid enemies and obstacles along the way because, well, escaping from Tartarus ain't supposed to be easy. And boy howdy, this certainly ain't easy. It's one of those simple to understand but really difficult to master games thanks to its sometimes ridiculous physics. The fundamentals work well, but it is too easy to swing around your boulder right into a hazard if you're not paying attention. You don't necessarily string a bunch of complex tasks in one long stretch, you have enough room to breathe, but damn if these levels aren't tough sons of bitches. But it was a hell of a lot of fun, too. Irritating, but very enjoyable. I had an informal rule that I would only play stuff for up to 2 hours each day because, well, I can't spend all my time playing video games, and in that time, I got through 36 of the 40 levels before I had to pry myself away. That's how invested I was, and this could have been my own Sisyphean task had I not restrained myself. It reminded me a lot of the more successful early Xbox Arcade and PSN titles like Super Meat Boy and Braid, in that they're simple platformers with a unique gimmick that are also quite difficult, but in ways that make you want to keep pushing. And that's all you could hope for when you're dealing with that accursed boulder. Gun Devil is a seriously intense platformer shooter developed by Egovik, a solo developer based out of Norway. You're the titular Gun Devil, and your wife has been kidnapped by the son of Satan, the caramelized dumbass, and you gotta shoot him and all his idiot friends back to hell. And I do mean idiots, because these demons are evidently bratty morons who are as cool as they are subtle. They are not. But you're quite lacking in subtlety too, as in addition to jumping around from platform to platform and avoiding obstacles, you are shooting the crap out of everything with your over-the-top weapons. A fireball launcher, an axe to launch Castlevania style, and my personal favorite, a gun that shoots bouncy pieces of trash. Blasting your enemies to Kingdom Come feels pretty good, and it was an appropriate challenge. It's one of those games that looks more intimidating than it actually is to play. I went out of my way to 100% this one, and it was damn enjoyable, with nothing too frustrating, or at least nothing that I felt that I couldn't handle after enough practice. Perhaps the primary reason for that is that this game is technically incomplete, in that evidently Egelvik wanted to add more stuff, but couldn't because of time and money and all that. Given the most recent Steam update, it doesn't look like they're working on a full version anytime soon, but don't let that discourage you. This is still a great choice if you want a fast-paced, explosive platformer for free, and you don't mind a raunchy, made-to-be-dumb type of adventure. Which I'll admit isn't usually my cup of tea, but this was self-aware enough for it to not bother me. Hard to care too much about that anyway when shooting up demons is so damn fun. I was in the mood for a puzzle game today, and I chose Color Coordination, a Sokoban-style game released by Argentine developer El Demso, or Dems for short. You're a worker who's tasked with solving puzzles to help feed data to a giant AI platform with your artificial helper Coco assisting you with puzzles and philosophical dilemmas along the way. Very simple, very retro, and just a little bit haunting, especially given the state of AI technologies in the real world today. But what haunted me most of all were the puzzles. My brain is wired very strangely for puzzles. For example, I think I'm very good at nonograms, but slide puzzles seriously mess me up. Sokoban might land in the not great at it side of things for me, because while I get the concept, I definitely struggle with getting everything solved quickly. And in this game, you're moving everything on a line or column at once, so there's quite a lot of things to consider, almost like a 2D Rubik's Cube. Due to time constraints, I unfortunately couldn't play every puzzle, but there's a nice selection and some high scores to beat if you want that extra challenge. This is a good option for puzzle fans, although I can't say I was all that invested in the story. I mean, Coco is cute and all, but the little dialogues between you and her are, I don't know, not that interesting to me. It's the same I'm an AI learning what it means to live stuff that you've likely seen before if you're a sci-fi fan, although the minimal color palette and pixel graphics at least present it in a unique way. Still, I was hungry for a solid puzzle game, and this delivered on that front. Bon Voyage is a lesson about knowing what you're getting into. This is yet another student project released by Team Cobblestone, a group of third-year students at the Breda University of Applied Sciences. This one looked great from the screenshots. A nautical adventure with a bunch of skeletons? Sign me up. Reminded me of those LucasArts adventure games, and I'm not just saying that because of Grim Fandango and Monkey Island, even if one of these guys is literally named Murray. Anyway, I was just walking around as the recently deceased Arthur, talking to silly characters and helping them solve basic inventory puzzles while exploring my new ship home. And I was getting into it despite its occasional jank and less than perfect English grammar, which, I mean, this was a Dutch team, so that's fine. Then I got stuck on a crab, had to Alt F4 out of the game since pausing suddenly didn't work, and when I reloaded my save, all of the characters had mysteriously vanished. Suffice to say, I was boned. And judging from the reviews, it seems that a lot of people experienced crashes and softlocks with the build released on Steam, and there's even a message on the store page that this isn't being worked on anymore. Which is a shame, because I so love this idea. If it wasn't locked to a university and given a full development cycle, this could have been one charming little adventure. It even won some awards from both the school and otherwise, so clearly it showed promise while in development, but the poor state of its Steam release unfortunately means that this one is dead in the water. And that sucks, but hey, at least it's free. Here we have another game that caught my eye from the visuals alone, Frame of Mind. This comes courtesy of SampleTech Studios, a team formed by second-year students at the Media Design School in Auckland, and it looks like they also published it, so hopefully no shenanigans this time. This is where I'd normally tell you about the story and who you are, but that's never made clear. Whoever you are, you wake up in your home and find the world around you is suddenly incomprehensible, and you set off to explore. For a puzzle game that takes about a half hour to beat, Frame of Mind feels very lean and tightly paced. Most of your objectives revolve around applying a mechanic across maybe one or two ideas before moving on to the next thing, and all of it gets pretty bizarre. Looking at the ceiling to invert gravity, or walking across platforms that don't exist if they aren't in your sight, are just some of the occupational hazards you'll deal with, usually while also navigating non-Euclidean levels that shouldn't logically exist. It's a solid, brain-teasing little game that reminds me of Antichamber or Superliminal, but with the key visual differentiator being, as you've noticed, the two-tone palette. It can sometimes be hard to see walkable areas with how this space looks, and you may have to fumble around a bit to figure out your next destination. Without giving away any solutions, I'll say that I found most of these rooms pretty cleverly designed, with one or two answers that I figured out accidentally. Good thing the puzzles are as well done as they are, because you will only play this for the gameplay and the aesthetics. There is no story and not even a proper ending. But you don't necessarily need that as long as you go into this with the right frame of mind. The very brief and meaningless adventure of Hero Man, developed by Torch 60, is actually a remake of an RPG Maker game from 2014, now ported to a newer engine with updated graphics and sound, in addition to new content. As you might have guessed, this is a parody of old school RPGs, where you play as the eponymous heroic man on a quest to, what else, save a kingdom from a demon. Very on the nose. Contrary to its name, this is not a singular adventure, as there are 18 endings to unlock based on your actions and morality. Most probably don't take more than 20 minutes to get, and some quite a lot less, but there's still enough things to do here to keep you occupied for a couple of hours if you go for every ending. But should you? I mean, 11 years on, its parody of old school RPGs isn't exactly deep or all that unique. And to some degree, you have to judge a comedy game by how much it made you laugh, and I guess this made me chuckle, but it's a pretty mild salsa if you catch my meaning. I mean, it makes successful observations about RPG tropes and gimmicks, but they're the same things people have been joking about for decades. But maybe that's just me being picky. If you love old school RPGs and your tolerance for humor is higher than mine, you might get a lot out of this. And like I said, there's a few hours of stuff to do, even if you'll have to contend with very basic RPG battling for most of the adventure. This very brief and meaningless adventure may not be for me, but I can see the appeal for those who want a quick giggle. Okay, I was pretty busy on day 14, so I deliberately chose something that was chill and wouldn't take that long to play, and I chose Will the Man Get Frog by French developer Marechal Banana. It's another Pico 8 game where you write haikus. That's it. Okay, that's not all there is. You have to choose parts of speech to draw your word bank from, and you'll get random words, which I think means this is technically a roguelike. But it really is as simple as that. Write up your haikus from the words provided, and then you get a nice little pixel art accompaniment that you can save as a GIF and share with friends. It even has passwords so you can write similar poems with other people. And aside from one season word, or kigo, you can write whatever you want. Want to put serious thought into constructing something beautiful or whimsical or evocative? Go for it. Want to write gibberish? That's just as well. You could argue that calling this a game is a stretch, as it maybe reaches over the boundary into tool, but you know, it was exactly what I needed today. This is something I could get lost in for hours if I felt like it. In fact, I literally did keep popping this on during the day and even in the days afterward. It is simplistic to its core, and unlike a lot of these games, it's something you could recreate without even turning your computer on, and yet, it is also easy to get absorbed into. The program is small, but mighty in its calm vibes, and that makes it great. For something else that's pretty relaxed, I went with the cute indie platformer Mason and Strings, developed by In the Snow Studios out of New Jersey. It's the classic story of a young girl in love trying to impress her crush by playing at a concert with their talking guitar strings. Because nothing is going to impress Tilly like playing the same 4 notes over and over again. I kid, of course, but I'll be upfront, my time with Mason and Strings was unfortunately tainted by circumstances outside of my control. My PlayStation was interrupted by life stuff, and when I booted the game again later that day, all my progress was erased. So I gave up for now, mostly because it was already about 10 PM by that point and I needed to wrap my work up, or maybe I was just having a rough day and didn't want to continue, but also because I found this kind of boring. While I like the idea of a platformer based around playing music, the implementation leaves something to be desired. It turns this into a really slow shooter with a rotating note wheel for aiming and sound waves chugging along to hit objects. Even considering the laid-back vibes, it doesn't exactly grab you on the gameplay level, especially with this floaty as hell jump. I have no problem with gentle games. I mean, the one before this was as gentle as it gets, but they still need a hook, and nothing grabbed me here. Maybe I'd sing a better tune if I was able to complete the game, and I'm not against popping it on once more to finish things off. And I see that In the Snow launched another game last year, The Newton Mystery, so it's nice to see that they're still kicking, even if I wasn't that impressed with their debut title. How about a complete mood overturn? Myst is a first-person horror game published on Steam by Noda Art and developed by Ukrainian developer Aeneas. Not to be confused with the Cyan game, and maybe to be confused with the Stephen King story, it goes like this. One day, while tractoring through the scary mist-covered forest, your ride breaks down and you gotta find some help. So it goes in these horror games. Very minimalist in presentation and not really that scary, more unsettling. At least in the path that I took. There are apparently a handful of endings, and I probably got one of the worst ones, or should I say the one that seems to end abruptly with no actual resolution. There seems to be a story to unravel here, but damned if I know what's going on. It's hard to tell what exactly I should be looking for when the landmarks are so far apart from each other and you're just wandering through nothing. And it's not that there isn't any direction given as far as where you need to go, but even having something like an objective reminder would at least point me towards something. As it is, I sadly didn't find any reason to hop back in after getting that one ending, especially as the game just closed afterwards. I didn't even get the chance to use my shotgun. There's some element of mood and atmosphere here, which was the point rather than straight up scaring you, but it's a facile atmosphere at best, relying on heavy distance fog and dark ambient music, but without the tension that should elicit. Aeneas is evidently working on another game, and I hope they take what works in Myst and applies it there, because while this one isn't high on the raising a pulse scale, there is potential for sure. I deliberately chose SteamRush because it's the type of game that I would typically avoid. This is another student project by the Italian team Sleeping Giant out of Accademia Italiana. In this steampunk Souls-like, you take control of an explorer named Laird in the rundown city of Hayes on a job to find something in an abandoned mine. Now the reason I'd usually avoid this is down to preference. I'm indifferent on steampunk and I find Souls-like games kind of boring, but since this was a student project, I figured it'd be pretty quick, an hour tops. Which was actually dead on. This took me just under 59 minutes to beat 3 bosses, 2 of which were kind of a struggle. I was still figuring out the controls for the Scrap Knight, and the final boss, Lady Elizabeth, was tricky with her combo attacks, although I actually took down this automaton on my second try. The combat is slow, but I don't know if I'd call it sluggish. Heavy for sure, but that's to be expected, and I think it feels alright. And I really like the overheat mechanic, landing attacks and parries building up a meter that, when maxed out, lets your attacks refill your health bar and stagger enemies. It's a good incentive to take shots whenever you can, and I also think they did a great job limiting your ability to spam this. And it has a pretty interesting world. There's a few lore tidbits here and there about what happened to Hayes, and these locations look pretty sweet. Just maybe reduce your graphics settings first. My PC, which is admittedly 6 years old now, wasn't able to handle this beyond medium settings. It may not be super well optimized, but I still really liked this one. Sometimes stepping out of your comfort zone is a good thing, and I'm really happy I gave this a shot. Stellarion is the first game I'm covering today that was released after I started working on this video. It launched on January 3rd, 2025, courtesy of 4 Hungarian indie devs who originally made this as a demo for a game jam on itch.io, where it took 3rd place overall. In it, you're a spaceship pilot who flies through an asteroid field to mine resources and blast space pirates to Kingdom Come, fly back to your space station base, upgrade your ship, and head back out into the final frontier, rinse and repeat until you buy all the upgrades or close the game. It's a nice and solid title with a simple, first-person arcade-ish flight sim gameplay loop that forces you to manage your health and mineral collection while dealing with pirates who won't hesitate to strike you down. The further you head out, the more lucrative materials you can get, but also the more dangerous threats you face, and of course, losing all of your health means losing all of your minerals, according to this untranslated Hungarian text. At least, I think that's what it means. While there isn't a lot of depth to this, since there's only one real level, and the only thing that changes is your ship's statistics, it's still fairly fun venturing out into the reaches of space. Not for more than a couple of minutes, though. It doesn't have the content or the excitement to engross you for that long. I put about 20 minutes into it before calling it quits, but I enjoyed it well enough. Maybe that's only because I had an itch to play a flight sim that was still pretty casual, but if you've got that itch too, this'll satisfy it just fine. Well, I played a game with mixed reviews on day 6, so on day 19, I did the same for a game with negative reviews. Which is why I played DNA Do Not Answer, developed by Well of Tales out of Rome, currently sitting at an overall 30% positive Steam reviews. In this game, you play as Alice Saunders, a girl who wakes up in a hospital with no memory of how she got there, and you have to escape. As you do. A lot of Steam reviews focus on the performance, which sure, isn't great, especially with its heavy motion blur and inconsistent frame rate, but that's not my main problem. This is an exploration game that falls into the worst trap possible, not giving you any direction as to what to do next. I ended up locked in the first area, unsure of how to proceed, and that's evidently a common issue since no one else who uploaded footage of this to YouTube got farther than me, it seems. So what did I do instead of progressing the game? Well, I stumbled around a bunch of rooms, found some cool floating objects, poked my head through the roof to check out a sweet skybox, and pushed over some carts. Then I got stuck behind a gurney and couldn't move, and that was that. Obviously, I wasn't having a spectacular time, but I can see some care and creativity here, and I wouldn't have featured DNA in this video if I felt otherwise. The end result certainly isn't good, and honestly, I had more fun messing around and pushing carts over just to hear that noise again. I can't recommend DNA Do Not Answer in its current state, but this is the team's first game, and I hope Well of Tales rallies to make something even greater next time. Pogo Rogue is a roguelike platformer with a unique mechanic, and I'll let you guess what it is. That's right, it's Pogo Sticks. Developed by the appropriately named Bounce Back Games, this is yet another student project, this time from the University of Utah, and was also a finalist at the Game Development World Championship in summer 2024. In this game, you're a robot on a pogo stick bouncing and shooting through procedurally generated levels, experimenting with new weapons, and bonking enemies in their dumb faces along the way. This is the kind of game that I wish I had more time with, but unfortunately my play session was once again cut short by life intervening. Suffice it to say, I only got enough time to understand the basics and do a few runs, but not enough to really dive into the gameplay. That means I only got to experience a handful of weapons and upgrades, like the balloon gun that gives you tons of height before you launch yourself, and the shotgun, which, I'm always gonna take the shotgun. So take my surface level analysis with a grain of salt, but from the time I had, it was pretty exciting. Being on a pogo stick that automatically bounces on the ground and walls might seem challenging, and it is, but I love using the weapons to give yourself a directional air boost in addition to slaying foes. While the movement takes some time getting used to, especially wall jumping, since I've never experienced that with automatic jumps in a game before, when I finally got the hang of it, it was loads of fun. Which makes me all the sadder that I couldn't experience much for this video. Though I was impressed enough with the gameplay loop to want to give it more goes, and maybe I will at some point. On to day 21. Last Seen Online, developed by Henry Tran, aka Sochin Studio, is an indie horror game inspired by escape rooms and 2000s internet nostalgia. You found a computer and you dig around the files, uncovering the story behind its previous owner who has gone missing under mysterious circumstances. Think of it like a cross between games imitating a desktop interface like Hypnospace Outlaw and Emily is Away, and all those Escape the Room games from the early Flash days. It's hard to talk about this game without spoiling any of the puzzles, especially with the footage, so if you like horror puzzle games and you want to give this a shot, I do recommend it, and you should probably skip ahead in the video. But I found this game intriguing enough even though the narrative felt alternatively basic and contrived. Its story doesn't dismiss the creepy dynamic of interacting with strangers on the internet, especially when you're a teenager, but doesn't really explore that idea any further than other stories have. And as far as the mystery goes, while I don't think the resolution is especially unique, the execution of the virtual scares and atmosphere works well enough to sell it. It also leaves you with just enough rope to wonder about its characters and their true end goal, while also delivering a conclusion that is satisfying even if the final moment does kinda come out of left field. Whatever you make of it, Last Seen Online is a haunting and occasionally quite clever little game that might terrify you more if you were a kid online in the 2000s, and hell, if you have bad experiences with that, it might cut to the bone. But if you're in the mood for a virtual horror puzzle game, this ain't a bad one at all. Trolley Dilemma sold me right away thanks to the concept. This game, developed by Albert Martinez out of Zurich for the Ludum Dare Game Jam, takes that old trolley problem and makes it very literal. You have to switch train tracks so that a trolley car avoids running people over, flying off the tracks, colliding into another train, or passing over a junction because they kinda just crash if that happens. It's such a clever idea and it's done pretty damn well, with an added layer of survival since you need to switch all the tracks yourself while dodging the cars. That's what elevates this from an effective puzzle game to an awesome one. It ties into the inspiration, but also provides that danger you need in a real-time setting. Putting yourself on the line is what the trolley problem is all about, at least from a moral standpoint. It's just a little more tactile here. The selection of 20 puzzles is pretty solid, even if none of them take that long to figure out. That makes sense though, since A, this was made in a couple of days for a game jam, and B, having to move around means the game is inherently limited on what you can do in a short sequence. I mean, if you could just click on everything, then the puzzle solving could get more difficult, but it probably wouldn't be as frantic. Sadly, its game jam status means that it's also very short. I finished it in under 20 minutes, and it was so enjoyable that I wish there was more to do. It hooked me pretty hard thanks to the creative idea, and while it's certainly not the prettiest game I've played, it's one hell of a ride for sure. Alright, let's get weird again. Sewer Rave was developed by Autumn Rain and originally released in 2018. In this game, you play as someone who falls into a sewer that happens to be the host of a rave, where all the rats and other creatures are having a good time, or a bad time, or maybe just a time. It's kinda hard to tell. Now, your enjoyment of Sewer Rave depends on whether or not you can get on its level. If there's a true end goal here, I doubt it'd reveal itself to you because this game is all about wandering from room to room, finding secrets, doing some occasional wonky platforming, and talking to your maybe fellow rodents, listening to them gab on about nothing and everything. Just imagine being plugged into an endless social media feed while loud club music is blasting in your ears and there's rats everywhere. And you have objectives in the form of characters who want cheese and fruit that you can find just laying around, but good luck finding those characters again after you talk to them, because almost every exit is randomized. So it's an ever-changing labyrinth. Imagine House of Leaves if it was run by Gen Z and had dancing rats. You might think that sounds like either the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. I'm not sure where I land myself, but I guess it's in the middle. I get the feeling that the last thing Autumn Rain wants is for this to be taken that seriously, and I'm all about that. It was silly enough for me to wander around for half an hour before putting it down, although I doubt I'll be crawling back to this sewer anytime soon. You remember those 3D flash driving games from the 2000s like On the Run? Well, Chase Master, developed by Duelator Games, is basically that, except it came out in 2023. There isn't much to this one. You're driving a car, picking up these cards in the city, and then you gotta escape the police. Then I'd say you do it again to get a faster time, but that implies you can tolerate this game for more than a minute. I'm not gonna harp too much on the graphics or the fact that there's no music, even though, yeah, the latter would sure be nice to have. Thing is, this game controls like garbage. Accelerating and turning is sluggish and barely responsive, and if you're expecting to do some sick high-speed maneuvers, forget about it, pal. Hell, even driving in a straight line sometimes seems impossible. This car needs a realignment because it drifts worse than a Switch controller. I wasn't expecting much from Chase Master when I picked it for today, and it lived up to that lack of expectation quite well. Honestly, the only reason I played it is because my original choice ended up not working on my rig, so I needed something that I could just stick in to fulfill this silly one free Steam game a day challenge. So well done, Chase Master, you successfully filled a void, and that might be the nicest thing I can say about you. Here's another game released by students at Breda University of Applied Sciences, Arid, developed by Sad Vizcacha Studio and the winner of the Best Student Game at the Dutch Game Awards in 2021. This is a survival game where you crash land in the Atacama Desert and have to, well, survive. Find shelter, gather items, avoid going hungry or thirsty, you get the drift. The other Breda game I covered, Bon Voyage, might have been a bust, but I'm happy to say that this one not only worked fine, but is also incredibly well detailed. There are the systems you expect from a survival game, like meters for hunger, dehydration, and sleepiness, in addition to your overall health, and weighted items that you need to use and store tactically. But as it takes place in one of the driest deserts on Earth, you also have to contend with intense temperatures and sun exposure, which makes exploration more nerve-wracking. I put about an hour into this, scavenging materials, running to find some shade, and petting my little Viscacha friend, who has kind of a glitchy eye, but it's fine, he's a perfect boy. Usually I'm not that into hardcore survival games, and indeed, if this wasn't offered for free, I probably wouldn't have given it a second thought. But considering that this was made by students over a limited period of time, it's surprisingly fully fledged and deep, and this makes this an awesome pick if you want a free survival game on Steam. Hell, even if this was sold for like $10 USD, I'd imagine it'd be worth it. There's lots to do, and at least from the portion I played, the world is designed in a naturally expansive way, so you could definitely get lost here. I mean, hopefully you don't though, it's a little warm, to put it mildly. You know what I haven't played in a long time? A mecha game. Thankfully, Steel Salvo, developed by 7 students at Izard Digital in Paris, fulfilled that hole, at least for a tiny bit. Your mission is to save the planet Neptune from a maniacal robot who's threatening to blow up the moon Triton, piloting your mech outfitted with machine guns, missiles, and dash boosters to do so. Now, when it comes to mech games, I'm more familiar with MechWarrior, and even then, I only played MW2 long ago and a bit of 5, and this is not a comparable beast. With the quicker movement, hovering, dashing, and sprinting, it's more in line with something like Ultra Kill than MechWarrior. Not that it's that hyper fast or anything, but you have to be quick on your metal feet to dodge bullets and deal with squads. Unfortunately, I hampered myself by playing with a controller, which felt pretty unresponsive. It was easy enough to beat the single mission, since it takes maybe 5 minutes on your first go if you don't count the tutorial, but switching between firing and movement in the fray is way too wonky on a controller. I later did a run with a keyboard and mouse, which I didn't record, and it worked far better. I always advocate that control scheme for FPSs anyway, and I'm not sure why I didn't heed my own bias to begin with. Did that make Steel Salvo worth your time? Well, sure, if you have 10 minutes to spare, but as I said, there's only one level and it's over before you know it. So while it is solid, I can't recommend it if you're looking for something substantial. Black Market, developed by Wani Games, was originally released in 2023 for 2 game jams, but only came to Steam in January 25. The game puts you in the role of a shopkeep in some kind of market, I can't tell what kind though, where you sell your ill-gotten wares to fantasy villains and ne'er-do-wells by bartering with them, or maybe you buy their guard service so bandits won't steal from your stores. That's a really fun idea, but Black Market sadly fizzles out pretty quickly. Your primary concern is making your weekly rent and praying that you have what your customers need since new items are randomly given to you in between shopping days. I would say that figuring out what they're looking for is a good challenge, but there is straight up a button that confirms for you what items in your inventory will solve their issue. It places significantly less importance on the barter function, which means you never figure out the value of what you scavenge beyond simple guesses. The characters you meet are pretty funny, shoutouts to the guy literally on fire, but there isn't any dialogue continuation. They just say the same shit over and over again, so it's not exactly fulfilling to help them out. And if there is an actual storyline behind all of this, it doesn't make its presence known early enough to keep you going for long. And considering that, unless I miss something, you can't save your progress, I doubt this is meant to be anything more than an arcade-style text-based sales simulator. Which is fine, but despite its concept, Black Market was sadly easy to put down after less than 20 minutes, sorry to say. But at the low cost of free, it is a bargain. The Zukov line is a horror game originally created in a week for Scream Jam 2023, and then later polished for a Steam release in 2024. In this title by Fish Tin Games out of Scotland, you're an engineer on a livestock train transporting some very dangerous cargo across a Soviet state. It's up to you to maintain all the systems on the train as it approaches its destination, or else the thing you've got on board will catch up to you and, well, do what horror creatures do. You're confined to one room, forced to deal with situations as they arrive, very much in the style of Iron Lung, almost to the point of feeling uninspired? And then a dash of Alan Wake 2 in its jump scares, and according to a game design log on Fish Tin Games' channel, that's an intentional reference. It's hard not to see this as a copy, but that doesn't make the Zukov line bad. You could say the same for a lot of games I've covered today. And truthfully, the dark atmosphere of a dingy train carriage mixed with the almost foreign light of a computer monitor will always work well as a contrast to set you on edge. There are mild jump scares, but most of the terror comes from the solid audio design and overarching implications of what you're doing. You know right away that the cargo you're hauling is going to kill you, and your bosses force you to sedate it remotely in addition to fixing welds and repowering the reactor, both directly and indirectly addressing the threat. And while the game is very quick to beat, the developers also included an endless mode so you can test your survival skills. Maybe it takes a lot of its cues from elsewhere, but if you can accept that, you'll find a good game here. I had a hankering for a rhythm game, and this one caught my eye. Lo-Fi Ping Pong, released in 2019 by Russian developer Kalvaris. As you might expect, you have to tap to the beat to defeat your opponents, these Hotline Miami-esque masks representing the 5 stages of grief, all while lo-fi hip-hop radio beats to Table Tennis 2 plays in the background. It's kind of a weird hodgepodge of ping pong and rhythm gaming, but a decent one. With only 3 buttons and a very simple gameplay loop, not to mention the soundtrack, you'd think it'd be pretty chill, but nope. First off, there are no set tracks, each playthrough is random so you can't learn these songs, you have to react on the fly. But it's surprisingly difficult, even if you're pretty good at keeping tempo. I think it's because the window for a late press is way too large, and the thing is, if you miss a swing, you start the song over again. Granted, they're about 40 seconds long, but if you're not able to string a good volley together, then you're screwed. As for the music, well, it's solid, and I'm glad it's not just the typical vibes, but not exactly something I want to pop on when I'm doing something else. Although the main menu theme samples Aphex Twin, so that's pretty rad. And you can pop your own songs in too. I tried it with some GTA 5 stems, and it seemed to work pretty well. Lo-Fi Ping Pong is passable as an action rhythm game if you mean it on its own terms, but if you just want to relax, this ain't the one for you. I know I have 2 days left for this challenge, but I figured I'd tackle this one as the penultimate game, If on a Winter's Night for Travelers by Dead Idle Games out of Berlin. It's an adventure game where masked figures gather on a train trying to remember how they got there, and you guide them through the most harrowing moments of their lives. Now, the central twist isn't exactly hard to parse, and thankfully the game shuffles through that part pretty quickly. It's more about the little moments and the smaller stories, the details that you slowly uncover. This is one of the darker games on this list, going into some twisted places emotionally and mentally, and physically too, but it's also a very, very good one. Probably the best game I've played for this video. Grimhook might technically be more fun, but this is more finished. Without spoiling the 3 major chapters, I love how we explore the societal issues plaguing these characters through more insular stories. Carlo's confrontation with his paramour talks about homophobia, Valerie's memory issues inspired by medical treatment of women's insanity, Samuel's spiritual journey to rise above racism. It may be told through the lens of the 1920s, but it's stuff that still resonates and is unfortunately relevant today. This is also relatively beefy compared to everything else I've covered. It's a full 2-hour adventure that left me wanting a lot more. Don't get me wrong, this unfolded in a very satisfying way, but I just wanted it to continue and dive even deeper. I am very much looking forward to Dead Idle Games' next title, The Many Sins of House Ocampo, coming out this year, but until then, if you're in the mood for a short but sweet adventure, this isn't one to miss. Let's end this list with a certified classic, Break a Leg, developed by game dev and YouTuber Just Jeff, who, coincidentally, also did a video on free Steam games. And no, I didn't rip him off, shut up. What's the objective of this one? You break your leg. It's quite literal, and that was the intent, and something you can beat in, 3 seconds? Okay, that's not the only thing you can do. There's some other really cool and definitely not random crap to uncover. Get killed by a giant floating rubber duck, divorce your wife, do some meth, feed a baby some uranium, typical stuff. For what is basically the video game equivalent of The Floor is Lava, if lava gave you bone fractures instead of burns, you might think it's strange why there's so many extra activities that have nothing to do with leg breaking. Well, there's a reason for that. This game was made via posting a YouTube short every day, and the top commenter would have their suggestion added. And you can imagine that a game crowdsourced to the YouTube comment section was never going to take itself seriously, and why should it? We've had a wide range of games in this video, good and bad, imitations and fresh ideas, loud and quiet, refined and irreverent. There's something out there for everybody, even those who want to simulate jumping off of a building and shattering their legs, all without paying a penny. There are plenty of other games I didn't talk about today, so go and see what's out there. You might find something you'll love. Just, watch out for the drop. Whew, that's 31 free Steam games done and dusted. For the curious among you, here's my personal ranking of everything I played for this challenge, but if you want a curated list, here's what I think is worth playing. As exhausting as this was to make, playing 31 games back to back, it was a hell of a lot of fun. Again, there are links to all of these games in the description, so check them out. I'm sure I'll be doing another round at some point, or maybe dive into other digital storefronts, so if you've got any recommendations, leave a comment below. And while you're down there, why not like this video and subscribe, because doing that is also free. I'm GrayJ, and I'll see you some other time with more silly little things. Bye bye!